Morning, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. Good news out of Washington. The House passed that $19.1 billion disaster aid package, and for folks recovering from hurricanes, that's good news, isn't it?
Yes, we had passed originally the bill back in January, sent it to the Senate. Then we did it again, adding additional funds for disaster relief on in April. And when it came back, unfortunately, it was blocked by a couple of my Republican colleagues. Now, I really don't understand why that happened, but when we came back on Monday, the first thing we did is vote on that bill, which finally passed. It's much needed disaster relief funds that we need here in Florida, also for Puerto Rico. So I am going to be making sure that the allocations come directly to the communities that need it the most, including the Keys.
What does that mean for folks still struggling with recovering from Hurricane Irma here in the Keys?
Yes, so I had a hearing in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee a couple of weeks ago where I was pressing the Secretary of FEMA on that issue specifically, mentioning to him that we're still waiting on tens of millions of dollars for Monroe County. They released the funds for Miami-Dade County. They hadn't released hardly anything for Miami-Dade, which I believe that's why they did that first, but I am continuing to put pressure on FEMA. There's no reason why 2 years later we still have not received that funding. So I expect them to release more funding for the Keys in the next few weeks. I'm putting a lot of pressure on them right now.
Okay, well, keep that pressure on.
Yes. Yes.
Meanwhile, you and Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Donna Shalala have taken on the federal government on the issue of the Homestead Detention Center, where they're keeping a lot of migrant kids. What do you want done there?
Yes, Bill, it's been truly a dark cloud for our community. There is no reason why we should have a high security detention facility for children that have committed absolutely no crime. There are right now over 2,500 kids between the ages of 13 and 17 years old. When they turn 18, what they're doing is they turn them over to ICE in shackles from one day to the next, many of them on their birthday. So I went early on in February, invited other members of Congress who came down with me. I left extremely disturbed. It feels like a prison facility. They're sleeping in areas of 144 bunk beds with numbers next to them. It's highly regimented. Most of them, I would say at least 80% of the kids that are being held have family members. And they're being held there for 2, 3, 6 months, some of them. They've been separated at the border, many of them, and they have family members. They are anxious to get to their family members. We are truly committing a crime against this generation of children. And so I've been putting pressure also on this facility. I've visited the facility several times. Last week, I went in and asked them if they had an evacuation plan now that we're entering hurricane season. They don't have an evacuation plan. I spoke with the director of the emergency management system at Miami-Dade County, who's extremely worried that they haven't even contacted him. You know, he says that it's very difficult to transport or evacuate a few hundred kids, let alone thousands of children from in a matter of days if we get a hurricane. So after we saw that court release the documents of those attorneys that are suing the ORR and HHS because of the treatment of these kids, we decided to call for a shutdown of the facility. We have several small nonprofit shelters that can take in those kids. We are seeing that the government is paying close to $2 million to a for-profit company where one of this president's top administrators, John Kelly, he was the chief of staff, if you remember. He's one of the board members of this company that's profiting from keeping these kids in this detention center. Imagine what we can do with those funds, and those kids should be with their families. It is a cruel policy. We're putting pressure on it, and we believe that the right step to take at this point is to shut down that facility and have those kids reunited with their families, if not taken to smaller shelters.
Oh. Speaking of migrant children, the House was able to pass the DREAM Act, something that couldn't get done in the last Congress, did it?
Yes. So if you remember, I talked about how we had to sit through committee for about 11 hours to get the DREAM Act through the Judiciary Committee. It was such a great moment. On Thursday, we had the gallery full of dreamers when we finally were able to pass a clean DREAM Act that provides legal status for dreamers that have been here most of their lives. They haven't been in any other country. They came here as young children. They're doctors, nurses, they're our neighbors, they work in our community, they contribute. Just in Florida 26, just to give you an idea, they are paying about $55 million in federal taxes every year. But we finally did it, and this is a small step towards comprehensive immigration reform. There's no reason why the Senate should not pass this bill. So now Dreamers are going to be focusing on putting pressure on Mitch McConnell so he can bring, we've passed, Bill, about 118 bills since we took office in January, and the Senate is not putting any bills on the floor for a vote. They're not doing their job. So I think, we need to start pressuring Mitch McConnell so that he can bring these bills. But it was a great, great moment when we passed the DREAM Act, and also protections for TPS recipients as well.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the president this week rolled back some of the Obama-era relaxation of restrictions on travel to Cuba and reimposed those restrictions this week. And, boy, it's got the cruise lines unhappy. A lot of folks are, just turned around on this one. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it's an erratic, flawed policy. He makes these decisions from one day to the next. What he's doing with this policy truly is punishing the Cuban people. He is not going to be effective in putting pressure on the Cuban regime whatsoever with this policy. There's no reason why we continue to promote a family separation culture in this country. The Cubans have every right to visit their family members. It's also going to affect many American companies here, especially in the Keys. A lot of the companies do have educational travel to Cuba. And as we have seen, these isolationist policies against Cuba for the past 3-4 decades have not worked. It remains a communist regime. They continue to violate human rights. I think we need to be tough on the government, but we have to have targeted policies against the government and their family members, not the entire island and the Cuban people. It's truly remarkable to me that he continues to punish the wrong people.
Meanwhile, on our border with Mexico, the president is imposing tariffs on Mexico in order to get immigration reforms in that. Do you see tariffs connected to immigration?
Absolutely not. Bill, I think we are seeing a huge influx of immigrants coming to our border. We do have a problem, but trying to build a wall, putting tariffs on Mexico, those policies don't help. It makes the issue worse. We are not processing any of the asylum requests, which is why we have that huge influx of immigrants at the border. He is trying to cut funding to the Central American countries, which we had provided so that we can reduce poverty and bring some stability to those countries. He now wants to cut that funding. And putting tariffs on Mexico is going to have a negative impact to our economy here in Florida. And I do know that a lot of my Republican colleagues are against these tariffs. So we need to really look at how we can work on comprehensive immigration reform, give aid to the countries that are in huge need because thousands of families are fleeing those countries because of poverty and violence, and start processing the asylum requests. And those are some of the issues that we can start working on instead of punishing countries and building a wall, which is just going to make the problem worse.
Okay. Well, Congresswoman, appreciate you joining us today on Morning Magazine. We'll talk more next week, okay?
Thank you so much, Bill.
Take care. Bye.